Minister.
With your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to take the opportunity to provide an update on the Government's progress in responding to the Infected Blood Inquiry's report. And I want to start by reiterating that the inquiry's final report laid bare harrowing aspects that make it vital we provide regular updates on this work. The infected blood scandal is an injustice that has spanned across decades on an unprecedented scale. Thousands of people have died and continue, sadly, to die every week. Lives have been shattered and the voices of victims ignored for decades. People have watched their loved ones die, and in one of the most chilling aspects that the inquiry brought to light, children were used as objects of research. It is hard to conceive of the scale of the damage done and the incredible suffering of all those impacted. On 20th of May, the country bore witness to the devastating findings of the Infected Blood Inquiry's report. It was a national moment, a profound moment of shame for the British state, and a moment of long overdue recognition for the victims and their loved ones. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, in his former role as Leader of the Opposition, acknowledged that suffering was caused by wrongdoing, delay and systematic failure by all parties across the board, compounded by institutional defensiveness. The former Prime Minister issued an apology on behalf of the state for the devastating impact that the use of infected blood and infected blood products has had on countless lives. And today, on behalf of this government, I reiterate that deep and heartfelt sorry. Now, firstly, let me reassure the House that the government is committed to acting on the findings of the Infected Blood Inquiry report to ensure swift resolution. We are also committed to working on a cross-party basis and will work with others to deliver the compensation scheme and get final payments to victims as soon as possible. It is vital that we shine a penetrating light on the lessons that must be learned, and that includes paying comprehensive compensation to those infected and affected by the infected blood scandal. I'd also like to thank honourable members who've played prominent roles in pushing this work to this point. My right honourable friend, the member for Kingston upon Hull North, has always been, and I know will continue to be, a powerful advocate for this cause. And her work in pushing forward the cause and representing the voice of those infected and affected was unquestionably pivotal in reaching this point. And I'd also like to thank my predecessor as Paymaster General, the Right Honourable Member for Salisbury. As I said yesterday at questions, I'm grateful for his work in the lead-up to announcing the compensation scheme and indeed his collegiate approach in doing so. And I hope we can continue to work together on this important issue. The scale of the horror that was uncovered by Sir Brian Langstaff's report almost defies belief. And one of the issues that the report brought to light is the importance of addressing the unacceptable culture of defensiveness in the public sector. And we must make sure that the reputation of people and protecting institutions is never put above public service. And this government will bring forward legislation to place a duty of candour on public servants and authorities to make sure this kind of behaviour cannot happen again. And that legislation must be the catalyst for a changed culture in the public sector by improving transparency and improving accountability. It will address that culture of defensiveness and help ensure that the lack of candour uncovered in the infected blood scandal, and indeed in too many other instances such as Hillsborough and Horizon, is not again repeated. However, we also recognise that as well as delivering institutional change, we must also provide financial redress to the people whose lives have been irreversibly and tragically changed as a result of the infected blood scandal. One of the most powerful conclusions, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the inquiry's report is that an apology is meaningful only if it is accompanied by action. And it is now my responsibility to carry forward this action, and I hope to lead this work not only with the support of this House, but with sensitivity and respect towards the people who have been so unfairly affected by this scandal. After all that has happened, listening to the voice of victims is crucial, and I will endeavour to work closely with the infected blood community as we progress this work. I would also like to take this opportunity to update the House on the progress being made in establishing the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. The Victims and Prisoners Act legally created the authority on 24th of May. And since this point, the interim Chief Executive, David Foley, has been working closely with Sir Robert Francis KC, the interim chair of the Infected Blood Compensation Authority, to set up the compensation service. It is frankly no small task. The Cabinet Office is supporting the organisation as it recruits and sets up a service that is easy to access and simple to use. The Infected Blood Compensation Authority itself will then provide regular updates to the infected blood community and all others interested in its work. Let me turn now to compensation. On 21st of May, I welcomed the former administration's announcement on compensation. And there is an urgent need to get money to people, Madam Deputy Speaker, in the most timely way possible. Further interim payments of £210,000 were made to people who are beneficiaries of the infected blood support schemes living with infections on June the 24th, bringing the total which has been paid in compensation to victims to over £1 billion. However, we recognise that this is not enough for many others who've also been waiting for far too long. The Cabinet Office is working closely with DHSC, the devolved governments and the administrators of the existing infected blood support schemes to establish the process for making interim payments of £100,000 to the estates of deceased people who were infected with contaminated blood or blood products and whose deaths have not yet been recognised. Work is progressing to ensure these payments are made as soon as we are able to, and I am pleased to confirm to the House today that applications for these payments will open in October, and we will set out further details of this in due course. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is also the matter of the final compensation scheme. We are committed to delivering this work and delivering it quickly. We are also committed to getting it right. The proposed compensation scheme was published on gov.uk on the 21st of May, and we are committed, as I indicated to the Shadow Paymaster General yesterday, to making regulations to establish the scheme by the 24th of August, as we are obliged to do by the Victims and Prisoners Act. But we also recognise the importance of building the support and trust of those who will access the scheme. Sir Robert Francis undertook an engagement exercise in June at the former government's request with the support of all parties. This exercise engaged those who have been most impacted by this scandal on the content of the compensation scheme. And I have been engaging with Sir Robert to hear his advice following his meetings with members of the infected blood community. And I'm considering his advice carefully with a view to publishing both his report and the government's position on it in advance of 24th of August. Finally, I would like to reassure the House that there will be an opportunity here to fully debate the content of the inquiry's final report. I am conscious that given the timing of the recent election, there's not yet been time for honourable and right honourable members to do so, and it is essential, in my view, that members of this House have enough time to digest and debate the devastating findings that the report set out. The Government is considering Sir Brian Langstaff's recommendations, and we will provide an update to Parliament on the progress we are making to respond to the inquiry's recommendations by the end of the year, as Sir Brian recommended in the report. Madam Deputy Speaker, the infected blood scandal is one of the gravest injustices this country has seen. And I want to end by paying tribute to the courage and determination of the victims of this scandal. Those infected, those affected, who fought so hard for justice. And in every debate, we remember that they are at the centre of all this. And it is for them that we must come together to restore the sense that this is a country that can rectify injustice. They deserve, Madam Deputy Speaker, nothing less. And I commend this statement to the House.
I call Shadow Minister John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I congratulate you on your elevation. And I would like to thank the Paymaster General for his statement this morning and thank him very much for the customarily early sight of his statement earlier this morning. The findings of the infected blood inquiry remain a shameful moment for the British state. And I would like, first of all this morning, to reiterate our apologies to all those whose lives have been changed as a result. This was an appalling tragedy that never should have happened. Now, on the 20th of May 2024, the day of the inquiry's final report, the then Prime Minister confirmed that the government would pay a comprehensive compensation to those who have been affected and infected, and this would happen as quickly as possible. And before the election was called, on the 22nd of May, I took a number of steps to ensure that interim compensation of £210,000 would be paid as quickly as possible to those registered with existing infected blood support schemes, as well as those who register with a support scheme before the final scheme became operational, and to the estates of those who passed away between then and payments being made. And I'm delighted that the Paymaster General this morning has confirmed that over £1 billion has now been paid during the run-up to the general election. Now, the legislation that was passed on the 24th of May established the Infected Blood Compensation Authority to administer the compensation scheme and appointed Sir Robert Francis as the interim chair. Sir Robert led the Infected Blood Compensation Framework study previously, and I understand from engagement with senior officials right up till the day of the general election that he undertook a meaningful series of engagement meetings, as the Honourable Gentleman has confirmed this morning, with representatives of the infected and affected communities during the PERDA period, as he has confirmed. We also accepted that the opposition's call for regulations to set up the scheme to be made within 3 months of the legislation receiving its royal assent. We also asked for an update to be provided to the House within 25 sitting days of the inquiry's final report being published, and I believe that the statement this morning honours that. I welcome that the new government has continued to prioritise this issue to keep the House and, of course, the victims and their families updated on progress. However, there remains specific questions that I think the infected and affected blood communities would expect me to respectfully challenge the government on. Could the Paymaster General confirm that the debate I promised after the Whitsun recess could be scheduled in September, respecting the fact that would give a reasonable amount of time over the recess to study the considerable report? Will he reiterate my commitment to respond to Sir Brian's recommendations one by one as quickly as possible within a comprehensive response to the report? I'm grateful today that the Right Honourable Gentleman is considering the advice from Sir Robert's engagement with the infected blood community in June. I hope he will not just consider, but decide to publish this in advance of the 24th of August deadline for making regulations. In my modest experience, any regulations laid will be open to misinterpretation unless the government sets out Sir Robert's considered reflections on the engagement exercise that he supervised and his considered judgment on what changes, if any, to qualifying criteria and parameters may be required to ensure that the scheme has maximum credibility. And I believe that his new ministerial colleague, the Right Honourable Member for Kingston upon Hull North, would also advise him that maximum early transparency will yield maximum understanding and acceptance of the path going forward. I'm anxious that the guarded optimism I heard during my 18 meetings with representatives from 40 groups in May will be sustained, and that the goodwill generated on the path to delivery will not be squandered. I give my commitment this morning that I will seek to support the Right Honourable Gentleman as he completes the delicate process of finalising regulations by building on the engagement exercises and the invaluable work of Sir Jonathan Montgomery and his expert team. On wider matters, could the Paymaster General confirm that the £1 billion he referenced represents the completion of the 90-day interim compensation commitment, or indicate to the House what quantum is outstanding and confirm that this will be paid within the 90 days I set out on the 21st of May. It is critical that Sir Brian's forensic assessment of culpability across the medical, civil service and ministerial domains is properly addressed as part of the government's evolving thinking on legislation on the duty of candour. And while recognising this is ultimately a matter for this House, it would be good if the Right Honourable Gentleman could define what role the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee could play in scrutinising the government's progress. Following my statement on the 21st of May, the Right Honourable Gentleman referenced potential criminal charges and asked me to ensure that all relevant evidence is made available for consideration by the prosecuting authorities. Could he update the House now that he is in a relevant position to be able to do so? And I also ask him to reiterate my acknowledgement of the call for memorialisation and that he would appropriately frame the commitment the government will make to the recommendations by the end of 2024 as I committed to. And finally, may I wish the Right Honourable Gentleman every success in this delicate work. I believe he is very well supported by an excellent team of civil servants to complete this work, and he will have my full support as he operationalises the legislation the previous government passed on the 24th of May.
I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman.
Clive Efford.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Gentleman for the characteristically collegiate way in which he approached those perfectly reasonable questions, which I will try to deal with one by one. Certainly in relation to the debate, I will be pushing for that to be scheduled as soon as possible. I think it's really important that across this House we are able to comprehensively consider not just what the recommendations are, but the level and scale of the criticisms that have been made as well. Yes, the government will respond one by one to the 12 recommendations that were made by Sir Brian Langstaff. And in relation to Sir Robert Francis, I entirely agree with the Right Honourable Gentleman about the need for transparency, and I certainly undertake to publish those findings and that report ahead of the regulations to operationalise the scheme being laid by 24th of August. In relation to his point about the 90 days, my understanding is that the payments were completed on the 24th of June, which is within that 90-day period. But there will be, as I announced in my statement, now these additional interim payments to the estates of infected people, and that process will begin from October. With regard to parliamentary scrutiny, I welcome the scrutiny that there rightly will be on this, whether it is indeed by PACAC or indeed in respect of this House more generally. I certainly undertake, as he did, to ensure that all relevant information is provided to the prosecuting authorities as they see fit for any action that does need to be taken against specific individuals. And finally, can I say, in respect of memorialisation, Sir Brian Langstaff was setting out that there should be memorials in the constituent parts of the United Kingdom, but also a specific memorial in relation to those children who were sent to Trelaws, frankly, for protection, but actually ended up with this quite awful, hideous situation where, frankly, they were experimented upon when they were at their most vulnerable. And I look forward, as he did and he committed, to taking forward that process of ensuring that we do have appropriate memorialisation, which I think is absolutely crucial to recognise the scale of what's happened here.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate you on your elevation to your position. I welcome the Minister's, the Secretary of State's statement this morning, but can he just go a little bit further about how the Compensation Authority will come to its decisions? Because there is concern that there is undue influence of advisors to the Cabinet Office, and that the voices of those who have been infected and affected are not being heard sufficiently in this process. There's concerns about the compensation process and whether that will be in addition to support payments, or whether they will be conflated, a non-payment of exemplary or punitive damages, no recognition of the impact of illegal experimentation or the knowing use of contaminated blood products, concerns about the payments that will be made to estates where people have died. Now, the people who really should be scrutinising this are the people who were infected and affected. So would he commit to involving them in the Compensation Authority so that they can have confidence in the decisions that are being made?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his questions, and can I deal first of all with saying that of course the voice of victims should be absolutely central to this, and I thank Sir Robert Francis for the work that he's done in the general election period to ensure that that is the case. And I will consider very carefully the recommendations that Sir Robert makes on the basis of that engagement and hearing the voice of the victims. But I want to just deal specifically, if I may, with one other point that my honourable friend raised, which was to do with the future of the infected blood support schemes. And I understand that there has been concern about this. But the current proposal is that no immediate changes will be made to the infected blood support schemes. Payments will continue to be made at the same level until the 31st of March next year, and they will not be deducted from any compensation awards. From the 1st of April next year, people who receive IBSS payments will continue to receive payments until such time that their case is assessed under the new scheme by the Infected Blood Compensation Authority. And once assessed under the scheme, the applicant will be able to choose how to receive their compensation, either as a lump sum or periodic payment. So I hope that does give the reassurance that my honourable friend referred to. But just to say, in respect of the Infected Blood Compensation Authority, I have absolute confidence in Sir Robert Francis to run that in an entirely appropriate way. And I know I was in the chamber with the right honourable gentleman when his appointment as the interim chair was announced, and it was welcomed warmly, as I recall, from the public gallery by the infected blood community.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to see you in the chair following your election. And can I thank the Paymaster General for early sight of the statement, and can I welcome the tone and the cross-party approach that has been taken to this very serious issue. Madam Deputy Speaker, victims of the infected blood scandal and their families have been waiting for decades to see justice. And as we know, tragically thousands have died without ever receiving compensation. And the report into the scandal chaired by Sir Brian Langstaff laid bare the suffering inflicted, the cover-ups and the systemic failures that occurred across the British state. Not only did the state fail to help the victims, in many cases people were lied to, treated with contempt and outright dismissed. Now we have the evidence. We have heard and read the most personal and courageous testimonials from victims. And one of my own constituents in North East Fife was a participant in the inquiry, and I've met with others in the constituency. It is thus imperative that every one of us works across the aisle to deliver this effective and just compensation scheme. Now, we welcome the work that has been done by Sir Robert Francis and David Foley in setting up the IBCA. It's clear that transparency is vital in establishing trust between the IBCA and the infected blood community. So I'm pleased to hear that the IBCA has met with the infected blood community over the election period. But I'd be grateful for some more detail from the Paymaster General about what that work going on will look like with the community. We not only have a duty to support the victims and their families with a fair compensation settlement, but in order to create a lasting solution, we must ensure the state cannot let such scandals happen again. And therefore, I'm glad that the Paymaster General agrees that we need to adopt a duty of candour for public officials to ensure that victims are never treated in that manner again. Given that we have so many inquiries ongoing currently, can the Paymaster General give more detail on when the legislation he referred to in relation to candour will be brought forward? Thank you.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady for those questions. Just to say as well, I look forward to working with her on a cross-party basis on this issue throughout the next few months, and I suspect quite a bit longer. I really do echo that need for cross-party working. She makes a very fair point in terms of the need to establish trust between the victims and the compensation body, which is going to be vital going forward. She asked me as well to say a little bit more about their voice being heard. Firstly, it will be obviously for the government to consider Sir Robert Francis's recommendations, which follow on from his extensive engagement with victims and victims groups during the PERDA period. And as I said to the Shadow Paymaster General a moment or two ago, I agree with him entirely about the need for transparency and the publication of Sir Robert Francis's work and report ahead of the 24th of August. Going forward, I will be writing out to the victims' groups to ensure once more that their voice continues to be heard. With regard to the duty of candour, it does stand alongside other matters that we are bringing forward, including the public advocate and ensuring that families who find themselves in the tragic situation that many did with Hillsborough are able to be appropriately represented at inquests as well. So I think we need to see them as a collective package, but we will be bringing those forward as soon as we can.
Tracy Gilbert.
Deputy Madam Speaker. My constituents, Justin and Rachel Gordon-Smith, lost their father 6 years ago on Wednesday. Their father suffered from haemophilia and was given infected blood in the 1980s. And I welcome today's statement. The current compensation scheme only makes provision for children of affected persons while they're under the age of 18, which doesn't take into account for the long-term impact faced by my constituents. Will the Right Honourable Friend meet me and the constituents to discuss this matter and to ensure that the scheme supports all affected persons in Edinburgh, North and Leith and across the country?
Well, first of all, I think the whole House would have every sympathy with the situation that her constituent and her constituents' family find themselves in. Now, in the scheme, in terms of there are, of course, those who were infected. There were, of course, those who were affected, which includes partners, parents, children, siblings, and indeed, quite rightly, those who provided care to infected people, because there are often situations when the carers weren't necessarily close relatives, but nonetheless provided significant care. In respect of her request for a meeting, if she could please write to me about that, I can ensure that there is an appropriate ministerial meeting.
Logan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I also want to congratulate you on your recent elevation. And I'd like to thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. is very welcome. And I want to echo his words in acknowledging that the Infected Blood Inquiry is one of the greatest scandals of our age, and also to begin by paying tribute to the victims and their families who fought tirelessly to bring us to this point. I'm glad to hear that the Minister is committed to meeting the 24th August deadline for laying regulations to establish the final compensation scheme, but I'm a little bit disappointed that he didn't set out a full time scale for the full operation of the scheme, and if you could say a little bit more about that, that would be helpful. And I'd also like if you could comment on his commitment to working closely with the Scottish Government on the scheme's implementation in Scotland to ensure that victims face no further delay in seeking redress.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for that contribution, and indeed obviously echo what he said in opening about the scale of the scandal and the appropriate tribute that he made to the victims. In terms of the timescale going forward, as I indicated in my statement, there will be those additional interim payments to the estates of the infected that will start from October. And as I indicated at questions yesterday in respect of the full scheme, I would expect the final compensation payments to start being paid from the end of this year. Also, in respect of his question on the devolved administrations, it is my intention to meet with the health ministers of the devolved administrations in both my native Wales, Scotland and indeed Northern Ireland. I'm committed to working with the devolved administrations, and I indicated earlier as well they will have a key role to play in the memorialisation process too.
Alex Barras-Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I congratulate you on your new place, and may I welcome the front bench to their role and thank them for the content and tone of this statement. I know my constituents in Cardiff West will welcome this update. But of course, this is not an isolated instance of the failure of the state to protect its citizens. We have the Horizon Post Office scandal, we have the Hillsborough families, and we, of course, have a matter which I must declare an interest in, that of the former child migration scheme, which the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown gave a national apology for back in 2010. Will the Paymaster General assure me and my constituents that this government is committed to bringing about the culture change that these scandals show is so clearly needed?
Yes, I can give that commitment, and I really should emphasise its importance because, as I indicated a moment or two ago, we are committed to the introduction of a duty of candour. We are committed to ensuring that families are supported at inquests and inquiries when you have situations as you did like Hillsborough. We are committed to a public advocate, and these are all really important steps we need to take. But ultimately, that has to be accompanied by leadership and a change of culture as well, to move away from what Sir Brian Langstaff described as institutional defensiveness. I think that is absolutely critical.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as a neighbouring constituency MP, can I congratulate you on your elevation to the chair? Madam Deputy Speaker, I must put on record my sheer admiration for one of my constituents, Clive Smith, who is also the chair of the Haemophilia Association. When I was first elected to this place in 2019, one of the very first constituency meetings I had was with Clive in his home, specifically talking about the importance of pushing this through the House. And can I put my thanks to the previous government and indeed the government that is now sitting in its place for the work that they have done collectively across the House to get ourselves into a position of providing reassurance to those that have been impacted. And can I also thank the Right Honourable Member for Kingston upon Hull North for the work that she was doing as part of the APPG. There are, of course, still concerns with the plans for how payments will be made to the estates of those who have died. There is a risk that payments being made will be entailed away from those who have been most impacted through the payments being made to the estates. And my understanding is that it is currently expected that executors of wills will decide on how those payments and those compensation payments are paid amongst family members, and it may not then end up going to those that have been most impacted. So could I ask the Paymaster General what plans he has to make sure that payments that are made get to those who are most impacted?
Thank you. And the honourable gentleman makes a fair point. Firstly, could I just echo his tribute to his constituent Clive Smith for all the remarkable campaigning that he's done over many years. With respect to his second point and the probate process and ensuring that money actually reaches where it is supposed to, the government is giving consideration to how we can best support victims through the probate process at the moment. I hope there will be further details of that in due course.
Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a huge congratulations to you on your elevation. And I want to pay tribute to the Right Honourable Lady, the member of my friend, the member for Hull North, for Kingston upon Hull North, for her dogged work in getting everybody to this point. I wanted to raise with the Minister, though, the interesting report that's come out from the National Audit Office this week, looking at compensation schemes across the piece and making recommendations to the Cabinet Office. As the Honourable Member for Cardiff West said, there have been a number of compensation schemes, but they seem to be derived ad hoc, and lessons aren't always learnt about how to deliver them, so victims in the middle get squeezed. And I do hope that the Right Honourable Gentleman can give us some, can tell us that he will be considering that and coming out with recommendations in due course.
Yes, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for that question. She's entirely right that we need to learn lessons from previous compensation schemes, where they've gone well and what is to learn from a good sense, and frankly, where they've gone not so well. And when we've looked at them and reflected upon them, the proportion of money we wanted to go to victims didn't quite make it. So the reassurance I certainly give is we are looking at those previous schemes and trying to learn best practice from them.
Sonia Kumar.
Madam Deputy Speaker, congratulations on your elevation. This is a welcome statement to my constituency in Dudley. Between 80 and 100 people were estimated to be infected with HIV and approximately 26,800 with hepatitis C after a blood transfusion. Will the Minister join me in paying tribute to the campaigners who have fought so hard to move this campaign forward in this research for justice for those victims?
I certainly join my honourable friend in doing that. And I think when we debate today, we really should recognise that this is a scandal that took decades, frankly, decades, unacceptable length of time for people to achieve justice. And I think that is why it is so important. Not only did we have that profound moment when Sir Brian Langstaff announced the inquiry's report, that we do take the time that is now necessary to learn the lessons for the future.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And thanks very much to my honourable friend for the update this morning. My honourable friend mentioned one of the real crucial points in this whole scandal is the fact that children were actually identified because of their genetic condition. And I'm wondering whether the honourable gentleman would explain how the issue with these children will be looked at, identified, and how on earth can we actually finance, how can we compensate children who were identified at a very young age, many who have died since. They need substantial compensation and much more support than I think they're currently getting at this moment in time.
My honourable friend refers to one of the most chilling aspects of this. And I mean, there's no varnishing this. The reality is that children who went to an institution, to law school, for protection, they had haemophilia, the school was set up in such a way that it was meant to give reassurance to their parents that that condition was going to be appropriately cared for. When they actually attended the school, they were used for medical experimentation. It is absolutely shameful and appalling. And I think, first of all, of course, the honourable gentleman is right about appropriate compensation, but it is also vital when we go through Sir Brian Langstaff's 12 recommendations that we put in place procedures, standards, structures that means something like that can never happen again.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week I met Mike and Diana Blake in my constituency, and they told me the harrowing story of their son, Stuart. Stuart was infected by contaminated blood and was then infected with HIV and hepatitis C. He was just 6 years old. Stuart lived and suffered and passed away aged 27. That was in 2006. The torment of the Blake family has been compounded by the fact that they have not received the full compensation that I know everybody in this House would believe that they are due. I want to say I warmly welcome the statement from my honourable friend from the dispatch box this morning, setting out the intention of moving forward with compensation for bereaved families like the Blake family. I'd be grateful if you could say a little bit more about that process.
I'm sure the whole House would want to send their sympathies to the Blake family on the loss of their son Stuart in such appalling, tragic circumstances. Now, as I indicated a moment or two ago, in terms of his parents, I don't think any of us can conceive of the grief of losing a child in those circumstances. But what I would say is that they are clearly people who are affected. They are exactly the kind of people that the scheme has in mind. And of course, whether it is partners, parents, children, siblings, or indeed those who provided care, it's absolutely critical that the compensation body recognises their suffering.
Catherine Fuchs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my right honourable friend for his statement this morning. I'd like to talk about Linda, who's one of my constituents in Monmouthshire, who sadly lost her husband, Bill Dumbleton, because of the infected blood scandal. He contracted HIV and hepatitis C. He lost his job when he told them that he had HIV. He had no life insurance because he was unable to get life insurance at that time because of his HIV status. So Linda had to pick up the pieces and deal with all the financial problems when he died. So can the Paymaster General please update the House on how the scheme will be used to compensate those affected by the scandal for spouses like Linda, and if the government is still aiming to make those final compensation payments by the end of the year?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that question. I can give her that assurance. We're looking to make and start those compensation payments by the end of the year. But again, I'm sure the whole House would offer sympathies to Linda on the loss of her husband. And I think my honourable friend highlights another problem when she speaks about the fact that Linda's late partner couldn't then actually secure life insurance, because another aspect of this scandal was that people who were both infected and affected were unable to access the support that frankly they should have been able to access in decades past.
Alison Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I also congratulate you on your elevation, and may I also thank the Paymaster General for his statement. Can the Minister update the House as to what measures are being put in place to learn the lessons of this scandal, including the indefensible time it has taken to put it right, plus improving the mechanisms for whistleblowing?
I think my honourable friend raises a really important question, and I think first and foremost we need to consider very carefully the 12 recommendations that Sir Brian Langstaff has made, and indeed the government will respond to those as requested in the timeline that Sir Brian Langstaff mentioned in the report. But in addition to that, we do need to introduce the duty of candour, the public advocate, but also support families at inquests and inquiries. And above all, and in relation to her point about whistleblowers, we really do need to lead a change that moves away from that culture of defensiveness to putting the public interest first.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and welcome to your new place. Congratulations. And I thank my right honourable friend for his statement today and the swift actions of this government in starting to resolve this situation. Over recent years, we've heard that there have been far too many scandals, such as Hillsborough, Horizon, this infected blood scandal, and even the Waspies. Does the Minister agree with me that people have to fight far too hard and for far too long to get the recognition and justice that they deserve, and this simply has to change?
Yeah, my honourable friend is absolutely right. And whether it is Hillsborough, whether it is Horizon, a number of other scandals that have happened in the past as well, and indeed this, you have a severe and awful injustice, but then what makes it even worse, what compounds it, is then having to fight for decades and decades, and that is simply unacceptable, and it's one of the things that this government is determined to change.
Michelle Scroggin.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think like many others in the House, I have members in my constituency who've been deeply impacted by this and will welcome the statement. Does the Minister agree that it's not only vital that we take action to deliver the compensation, but also tackle this defensiveness culture that we see not only in this scandal, but in every scandal that's come forward? If we don't tackle it now, it's never going to change.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I think when you read Sir Brian Langstaff's report, you read the emphasis that he puts on culture and the chilling nature of what he talks about as institutional defensiveness. That is something we need to change. And I say to the House that we will put forward legislation, there will be legislative measures that we hope will make a significant difference, but it is also a question of attitudes and culture, and that is going to require leadership to change.
Tessa-Symonds.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to ask the Paymaster General whether he can clarify the fact that actually an office for the whistleblower would be an independent office for the whistleblower, would be very helpful in progressing this sort of clarity, transparency that he was referring to earlier.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I do think protection for whistleblowers is important. That is something that the government is considering and constantly keeps under review.
Alison Hugh.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and congratulations on your elevation. Thank you to my right honourable friend for updating the House so quickly after the general election. I know this issue is one that families in my constituency of Scarborough and Whitby and across the country care about deeply. Will my right honourable friend commit to ensuring that honourable members are regularly updated as we move towards drawing a line under this dreadful scandal?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do give that commitment. I hope the whole House will see that we have, as a government, very swiftly moved to update the House. I think it's absolutely critical, as I've said, that the whole House gets to have a full debate on Sir Brian Langstaff's report and its recommendations, and I certainly commit going forward to keeping the House regularly updated.
Daniel Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and congratulations on your elevation to the Chair, and thank you to the Paymaster General for his statement and action so far. I was proud to stand on a Labour manifesto promising a duty of candour. After 14 years of broken promises, people in my constituency, Weston-super-Mare, like so many others, have lost trust in politics and public institutions. Cynicism is a toxic consequence of these broken promises. I'm so glad to see the duty of candour in the King's speech, but can the Minister update on progress of this long overdue measure?
Yeah, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that question. I think he points to something which is a deep point across this debate and indeed across issues like Horizon and Hillsborough, which is a lack of trust in public institutions. And it's happened because it took decades, far too long, for the truth to come to light. Now, the government is committed to bringing in the duty of candour. It's in this King's speech, alongside the measure to create a public advocate and to support families in inquests. And I very much look forward to that being brought forward as soon as possible.
Jessica Turl.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and congratulations on your elevation to the Chair. I would like to thank my right honourable friend for his statement and pay tribute to the brave campaigners whose lives have been changed in the worst possible way by the scandal, including in my constituency, Bournemouth West. Many of these campaigners are children of the people who have died as a result of their infections, and they have suffered immeasurably. And I'm pleased to see that there's support for this community across the House. Can the Minister confirm that the voices of the affected children will be included in his ongoing discussions and in the implementation of the recommendations to ensure there is fair and proper compensation and true accountability for this scandal?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And of course, we have to listen to relatives, including children, of those who've died as a result of this scandal. It's an unfortunate and awful fact that thousands of people have died. And now we must listen to their relatives, who are their voices for today in this process.
Sam Rushworth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I, like many here, have constituents affected by this, and indeed I grew up without a grandmother due to infected blood. But some of my constituents in Barnard Castle not only lost a child, but had their other son experience severe mental health challenges that are lasting throughout his adult life as a consequence of the strain placed on them as a family because of their long struggle for justice. And I'm grateful for questions about this duty of candour, but I wonder if the Minister would agree to regularly update the House on these other measures that will bring about that culture change, because culture change is difficult, and it's difficult to know if and when it has been achieved. And I'd be interested to see a regular update on that.
Well, firstly, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the whole House would want to extend their sympathies to the honourable gentleman on the loss of his grandmother as a consequence of this scandal. And he's entirely right to highlight the impact that has on others, the people we call the affected people, as a consequence of this scandal. With regard to the culture of institutional defensiveness, the critical thing is that people do not put protecting individual reputations or protecting the reputation of institutions above what is in the public interest and above the duty of public service. I'm not suggesting for a moment that that is an easy thing to lead on, but it's certainly something this government is determined to lead on. And of course, I undertake to update the House regularly on that.
And the last question, John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I congratulate you on your elevation to your position. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that all too often the public note that in cases of egregious state failure such as this, prosecutions do not follow? It appears to the public that there is, in some ways, impunity. Compensation is belatedly given, reforms are made, but individuals all too often are not held accountable. And that is part of the problem that we are discussing this morning. Would my right honourable friend commit to giving further updates about the steps that may be taken to ensure that individuals are held properly accountable? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And look, of course, whether individual people are prosecuted is rightly a matter that's independent of government and for the Crown Prosecution Service. What I do undertake to do is to ensure that all relevant information is made available to the prosecuting authorities so that that decision can be an informed decision based on the evidence. And I also undertake, as my honourable friend asks, to keep the House updated about that.
We now come to the general debate on making Britain a clean energy superpower.